last time we talked, I think it was after the Juneteenth celebration, right?
Yeah.
And just as recently, yesterday, as we were recording, we had the Feeding the Juice.
Yes, sir.
Over at Suavecito headquarters. What are your initial thoughts, like when you see so many people of the community, artists, people who own small businesses, everybody alike come together on an event like that?
Man, brother, it's shocking, actually. You know, like, I want to say, like, the right answer would be that it's expected, but it's not, because I never saw that as a kid. I never saw community really come together to protect us or to make sure that we were taken care of. So it's inspiring to see it happen. I just love seeing more young people get involved and being a part of that process. So it's inspiring, brother. I think that's what I've taken away from yesterday.
Yeah, it was really incredible to see too, because we gave away 3,000 boxes.
Yeah, that's
3,000 boxes of food. And I remember towards the beginning, I was like, I don't know, like, are we really going to be giving away all these boxes? And when towards the end, when we were on the last few, I was like, what? Like, we actually got down to there, you know? Like, it was nuts. It was really cool to see, because I think towards, like, after 11:30, it was just like nonstop.
Yeah.
Guys coming through. So it's just, you know, spread of the word. Social media, obviously, too.
Social media helped a lot.
But man, it was crazy to see such a good turnout and us being able to give out all those boxes. I thought we were going to take some home and stuff like that, you know?
I agree. I wonder how many of it was just folks that drove by and saw the signs and were like, oh, let me pull in.
Yeah.
That was something that went through my mind too, because I know that social media is important. I know it's a good tool, but I also know that in the community, a lot of people really rely on that face-to-face contact, whether it's a flyer or they're driving and they see a sign. I think that the team that was working on the ground too, like in front of Suavecito, holding the signs, shout out to Ali Rock, Gucci Mar, and Julie, and Oscar Reyes, and all his volunteers that were doing that, because I think it really helped a lot.
Well, speaking of that, with your campaign, how do you find the balance between marketing on social media but also marketing out in the streets, going door to door like I've seen you do, and kind of finding that balance between what you spend the most energy on?
My entire commitment is to be on the ground, is to be working with the people. I not only have a strong group of volunteers, upwards of 40 folks that help me with my campaign, but I'm on the ground myself. There's not a pocket of Ward 5 that I have not physically walked. Whether it's Logan, whether it's downtown Santa Ana, whether it's Artesia Pilar, Santa Anita, First Street, whatever it may be, I've proudly walked every single pocket of Ward 5 and have physically handed out my literature and engaged with voters, because I think that that's important. You need to meet the people, and no matter how hard that sounds to walk all that, it's needed, and it's actually really invigorating to be able to see these people. I've had so many times where I'm wearing a mask and someone's like, is this you? And I'm like, yeah, it's me. And I take out my mask and they're like, okay, wow, someone's never came to my door. So it's nice. Yeah,
and especially too, the last few weeks have been super hot, man. Like, we're record-breaking temperatures at the end of August.
Today was 114. I was walking and I swear I was sweating so much. And I was sweating so much. One of the voters offered me a beer. He's like, hey, do you want a beer? I'm like, I'm good, man. Yeah. So then we just drank scotch. I'm just joking.
No, that's cool. I think the people in Ward 5 and the people that you've gone door to door, they appreciate that, because they know it's very easy to say, hey, look outside the window, it's 110 degrees. All right, we're not going to do it today. Let's postpone to another time. But now you're still out there doing it. You know, what motivates you to continue to?
Man, my daughter motivates me. My daughter, I'm sorry, baby, but we walked together that day. We walked together, and of all the days to walk, she was like, oh, this is so hot. So we got a little creative. My partner and my daughter came up with the idea of taking the car, driving the car with the AC on, leaving it on, getting out of the car, walking one side, then doing the other side. So it was actually being more strategic and utilizing our vehicle, air conditioning, walking. And then for me, because I had to cover so much of it, and I have to also engage with voters and be respectful of the public health concerns, I had a little boombox with me and I was playing music the whole time. So as I was walking, I was hearing music, and that helped me a lot too.
Yeah, of course, some hip hop, right?
Yeah, oh yeah, always. You know, it was cool. I was listening to J Electronica Exhibit C, and so Farron and I were walking and we're listening to music, right? And so we would stop and appreciate a bar and be like, "Oh, did he just say that?"
Yeah.
Or like, hold up, voter. And then we just finish the bar and then we keep it going. It was pretty cool.
So as things have gone closer to November, election season, how has your strategies changed from the first time I spoke with you back in, what was that, June?
I think, brother, like, obviously there was like a getting used to when it came to COVID. Like, COVID has impacted our communities so intensely that it's changed our way of life, the way that we educate, the way that children learn, the way that businesses operate. It's completely forced us to rethink things.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's good and bad, but the challenges that we faced was we realized, okay, we're not going to be able to knock on doors
Mm-hmm.
and physically engage with voters.
Mm-hmm.
I was really looking forward to debating my opponents in person.
Yeah.
So it was like, okay, how do we do that?
Mm-hmm.
So everything went virtual, which meant I had to have a more social media heavy campaign. And I also had to be really creative about reaching people. So what we did early on was literature drop. We would just take the literature and we would physically go and just leave it at the home.
Mm-hmm.
So leave it at their door, or have a door hanger.
Yeah.
And once we got there, after like a good month of walking, we figured out, okay, if there's voters that are outside and they're comfortable, we can engage them. And then we had myself and a core group of volunteers that were comfortable with that were willing to talk to voters. So just having a hybrid model of dropping literature, making sure people are seeing you, there's visibility, and then lastly, making sure that you are engaging with voters. So ways that you can do that where you're being respectful of the pandemic is text banking, phone banking, and literature dropping, and of course talking to voters.
Okay. What do those literature drops consist of?
Yeah, so it's pretty simple. We have our literature for the campaign.
Mm-hmm.
We just go door to door. We leave it on their door,
Mm-hmm.
and that's it. We don't talk to any voters. We just respectfully leave it at their door. And I think that's been a pretty effective strategy, because once I do a second run, I would come across a voter and they'd say, "Oh, I saw your stuff."
Yeah, okay.
And
nice.
so it makes it a really good transition to get that conversation going.
So looking at the big picture, I feel like a lot of the focus is obviously pointed towards the U.S. presidential election.
Yeah.
But how do you get the common citizen, especially here in Santa Ana and just in Orange County in general, to the importance of voting locally and how much that has a greater impact on your everyday, day-to-day life versus the president of the president of the entire country?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really good and critical question. Shout out to the paleteros and the
Yeah.
ice cream trucks. We just have an ice cream truck that's gonna go right past us, bumping Chavo del Ocho.
Yeah. Old school truck too.
I had to pay respects to it. All right, so getting back to the serious question. The presidential election is imperative because it allows us to have a president that can represent us or cannot represent us,
Mhm.
but it also has the important role of choosing who our judicial officers are,
Right.
who the Supreme Court is. All of these decisions affect us. But at the same time, local elections are just as important, because although the president makes decisions for the country, we have our governor that makes decisions for the state, and then you have your elected officials that make decisions for your city.
Yeah.
And as long as I can remember, we've had elected officials that don't make decisions for the people. If you look at public policy in Santa Ana, if you look at government in Santa Ana, we have people that are serving the interests of their supporters. And that's, companies, that is developers, that is a lot of services that don't represent our needs. For instance, Santa Ana is the youngest city in Orange County. 31% of our residents are under the age of 18. But we have one library, right?
Yeah.
We don't have city-funded sports programs, baseball, basketball, soccer, football programs like we did when I was a kid. We have boxing programs that are having to fund themselves, like TKO boxing program, an amazing program. I attempted to have a boxing program myself. It's incredibly difficult to sustain that without support from the city. But there are services that are lacking these support and resources. And if we make bad decisions to elect somebody in office that doesn't represent the people, doesn't understand their challenges, well, then these challenges get that much more complicated because they continue and they happen in perpetuity. And so if I could send a message to a common voter, is, believe it or not, your voice does represent power and represents change. I've seen so many elections where folks have won by 7 votes, 14 votes, and it really makes a difference of how that city's future can look moving forward.
Right.
So get out there and use your voice.
How would you address it, at least in the high school? Because I know I turned 18 in the year 2012, and I really didn't know anything about local. I just voted for presidential and left the rest of my ballot blank. And I just felt like, as a high school student, no one really talked to me at the high school about, hey, like, this is what you're going to do when you vote, etc., etc. Also pay attention to local stuff. So how are ways that you can incorporate, or ideas that you can have to incorporate at local high schools throughout Orange County and throughout eventually, the entire country, to teach them to vote locally?
It's a great question. I can speak from experience that if you want to have folks engaged in their communities, especially in voting locally, you have to educate them, right? And education is a process that doesn't happen overnight. So we need leaders that are going to be committed to using their platforms to educate the people about things that are ongoing, things that are current, not only things that are happening around elections. If you have somebody that is only coming out to do good in the community around an election, that's not a leader. That's an opportunist. Right? So how do you educate folks to make conscious decisions come time to vote? I think that we need to have an emphasis on political education and civic engagement. So it's difficult because there's not many places for young people to go, but you can follow credible organizations that can tell you what is most representative for you. The Orange County Labor Federation is a labor group that consists of over 90,000 members of Orange County unions, and unions represent working class people. They represent, low-income families and families that are generally in need, and they consistently get out very good voter education, and they send it to people in the mail, which helps them make better decisions for the community. I remember when I was that age, that's how I voted, as I would look at the Orange County Labor Federation as a resource to help me understand these issues. So anybody that has more questions, I would encourage them, check out Orange County Labor Federation, OCLF, or they can reach out to me personally in the DMs or give me a call, and I would happily go through the ballot and help them out.
That's awesome. I'm definitely going to put that in the show notes.
OCLF, Orange County Labor Federation.
Because I think a lot of times people don't vote just because of the lack of knowledge, and they don't want to seem like an uneducated voter. And I know a lot of, in 2016, I know a lot of my friends and people that I was around at that time, they just said, hey, I'm not going to vote, because they only focused on the presidential, and then they said, well, we don't like either presidential candidate from the 2 major parties, but not realizing there's a bunch more to choose from as well. And they just left their ballot empty and didn't vote at all, and that can hurt communities, especially at the local level.
That's how you elect bad leaders, is that way, by not voting. Because unfortunately, there's folks that are entirely committed to their party, and folks that are entirely committed to this party, and at the end of the day, there's going to be folks that are voting, and they're counting on us to not vote to win these elections. So that's why I think that the future of California will change when young voters come out and use their voice. I think that once we have that, we're going to see a dramatic change in politics, in public policy. Envision a world where college could be free. In order for us to do that, we got to have young people turn out their vote.
Right. Now, we mentioned COVID throughout this show, and it's been an ongoing theme in 2020, but how do you see COVID affecting the elections? Because this is something that I've been talking about with a few different friends the past couple of weeks. It doesn't look like it's going to go anyway anytime soon, so how does it affect the in-person ballots?
In-person ballots are not going to happen. So we're not going to have any voting in person, from my understanding. Governor Newsom, a governor of the state of California, has declared us a vote by mail state. So that means that on October 5th, you will get your ballot in the mail. So you can start voting as soon as October 5th. And there's definitely concerns around that, because we've seen voter fraud happen where, folks can, let's say a household gets X amount of ballots, potentially sign a ballot for somebody and send it out. That's scary.
Yeah.
So I can understand those concerns. At the end of the day, though, I wouldn't want to see an election get canceled, and democracy has to continue. So I think we need to be just careful and diligent about that. I know one way that I'm looking to support voters here is I will be doing ballot drop-offs. So I will physically be reaching out to my constituents in Ward 5, every single home in Ward 5, so that if they are supporting us or whether they're not supporting us, if they want their ballots to get picked up, we are happy to pick them up and drop them off to get in the way of that challenge of having to drop it off. There's going to be ballot drop-off locations, and we're going to look to do our part in helping the community that way.
And isn't it crazy in the year that we can't vote in person and we have to do mail by vote? The whole thing with the United States Postal Service is happening, right? And it's
Tragedy.
Cutbacks on that. Something that's been, like forever, right? It almost it's very fishy.
Skeptical.
Yeah,
right?
No.
It's crazy how that works. I don't like it, man.
No.
I don't like it. I mean, they are so underappreciated. Our postal workers, they are some of the most important workers in the history of America. Like, they have an important job. They're nationwide, doing amazing work for our community, and they physically have to walk and drop off mail, and they do it every single day with the exception of Sunday. And they're getting budget cuts, right? And then that's why I don't support companies like FedEx. You won't ever have me send you anything in FedEx. It'll either be UPS or USPS, because those are folks that are paid livable wages. They're union members. They're local people in our community, and we cannot cut their budget. We need to protect those postal workers.
Yeah, and I think that's something 2020 has brought to light, whether it's through the United States Postal Service or even shopping local at the beginning of the pandemic, because I think that was the biggest fear, is all these local businesses going out of business and eventually having to close up shop and becoming very corporate ran throughout, major cities, small cities, rural cities, doesn't matter. I think that's something that is definitely I'm more conscious of what I buy, where I buy it from, who's sending it to me, that kind of stuff, because I definitely want to help those local businesses, because I know during this time they're gonna need it most. I've been sending letters to my different cousins that don't live too far in Riverside.
That's so cool.
And it's just like that helps the postal service, though. You know what I'm saying? Buying stamps and doing things like that.
Shout out.
So I think we have to take initiative if we don't want things to change so drastically and become like corporate ran in small communities like this, to take over.
I agree. It's important, brother.
So what else what are some other updates you have with your campaign going on?
Yes, so since you and I first met, we have successfully been campaigning, reaching people as often as we could. We're number 1 on the ballot, so that's huge. We're the first name that you're going to see when you get your ballot to vote. In addition to that, we've been able to secure endorsements from the Orange County Labor Federation. We got their open endorsement. Labor's Local 652, Communication Workers of America, that's AT&T, Verizon, that's all of this internet, phone related, anything, that's their union. We were able to secure the endorsement of AFSCME, Local 1902, Local 2076, so those are all your eligibility workers. Those are your Southern California Water District employees. Planned Parenthood endorsed us. I mean, everybody, whether it's workers, whether it's people that are working in social service, whether it's people that are fighting for women's rights and reproductive rights, they're backing our campaign, and they're backing us because we back them. For me, these endorsements have not been specific to just the campaign, but I have a track record of over 10 years of doing work that in its root is about freedom and liberation. And this campaign, that's exactly what that's about. So those endorsements are incredibly special to us because they're representative of the values that we have. Furthermore, we have been a grassroots campaign from the beginning. We don't receive any corporate dollars. We've been able to raise close to about $20,000 in funds, and we have made sure to print locally, print at union shops. We've been able to do everything that we can to not only have a strong community-based campaign, but at the same time, everything that we print, every sign that we make, every shirt that we make is locally and union made as well. So we're proud of that. In addition to that, we found out that there was a poll recently that shows we're actually ahead of our opponent.
Wow.
So that's an honor to us, and it's representative of how hard we've worked and how much belief the community has in us and our candidacy. And then something else I'd love to talk about is different public policies that we're going to focus on. So, yeah, where do you want to start, brother?
It's up to you. Start wherever you like.
Okay, so let's talk about education. So education is something that is really important to me because I didn't have all of the best experiences as a student navigating education in Santa Ana. I'm a product of Santa Ana Unified School District. I went to Fremont Elementary, Spurgeon Intermediate, and Santa Ana High School. And early on, I felt very supported as a child. But as I grew older and as childhood got more difficult, you know, being raised by a single mom and not knowing my father, and, you know, it's just my brother and I, it became more increasingly difficult because the older we got, the more complex these issues felt. And so I felt like a lot of the times my teachers didn't understand some of those struggles I had.
Right.
And so I kind of felt alienated a lot of the time in the classroom. But music was one place where I felt safe. And there wasn't a whole lot of options for music and art programs when I was a kid. And so I had a good educational experience, but I always wished it could have been better to better support and understand students like myself. So education is the most important priority to me in the city. And I'm a community health worker. I work for the county for a mental health program, so I utilize data for a living every single day. Education is something that we need to utilize to ensure that this community is safe. Understanding that education is a social determinant of our public health needs to be at the forefront. So I'm looking to create a citywide free Wi-Fi program to support students and to remove barriers to education and increase access to it. Furthermore, I understand that we have a lot of young people in this community, and a lot of these students get to kindergarten and they're not school ready.
Right.
So I'm going to create an early learning initiative where each community center in the city of Santa Ana will have early childhood education programs that will increase access to STEM, science, technology, and art, everything that they need. We'll have access to music, art programs, their math, their fundamentals of writing. So that way, by the time a kid gets ready for kindergarten, they've already had exposure to education, to the arts, to music, and so they're more school ready. And as a result, data shows that when children are kindergarten ready, they are more ready for their educational journey. And if we want to create more scholars, social workers, educators, psychologists, whatever it may be, those don't happen on accident. Those are created. So let's invest in community, and that's how we'll get that done.
So how do you plan on incorporating a lot of this stuff? Because right now, a lot of schools have turned to online education, right? Learning through Zoom. And I've had the chance to be a part of that, right? Morning shift, I'm working with kids who are on campus, but they're learning through their computer. And I just see it as such a struggle, and then they won't be able to express those arts in person, right? They won't be able to learn how to play instruments. How can we incorporate some of those art programs and stuff like that through online learning, let's say if this lasts another year or so?
Great question. It's a very critical question, and it's something that we need to explore. So the approach that we would have, and I'm going to take it from my professional work experience. I work with children Monday through Friday, and as a community health worker, I work with foster children as early as 5 years old to my oldest being about 18. And some of my kids are on the spectrum and are autistic. Some of my children suffer with, PTSD, and I have other cases where children are suffering from more adverse mental health conditions, and everybody's needs are different. So I have some kids where I incorporate PCIT and behavioral health trainings into those things. I have some kids where I have more trauma-informed approaches to utilizing music and art as a form of therapy. I have some kids where I use, a lot of modeling behaviors on how do we play with our toys. So from what I've learned and from what I've gathered is we can have access to arts, education, music, and technology, and we can do it remotely, and through, let's say if the platform is Zoom, we can do those things. I think the barrier that we need to remove is access to those instruments, access to those arts, right? So if we have a budget and we're able to supply students with the materials that they need, there shouldn't be a barrier to teach them remotely and virtually. If we have good instructors and good leaders and good materials that we can distribute to the community, I think that that's something that we can do. If we keep our class sizes between 10 to 12, that should be very doable.
Right. How do we, so as far as education reform goes then, because teachers, when they get tenured, sometimes teachers that are tenured, very comfortable and they don't necessarily put the best foot forward, right? And now you're asking also too to put more teachers in buildings so they're smaller classrooms. How do we make sure we hire good teachers that are still out there, still putting their best foot forward, regardless if they're tenured or not, regardless of what grade they're teaching and what communities they're teaching in? How do we make sure we have the best teachers possible to teach future generations?
Yeah, I think that from what I've seen in this community, the best educators that I've ever had access to were educators that were from this community, that live in this community. I think that there's an important psychology in how you do things and how you perform services in the community that you live in, right? If there's something that I've experienced is that the teachers that taught me as a kid that weren't willing to be in my neighborhood past sundown, well, it spoke volumes in how serious they took things, or how not serious they took things. So I think that the quality of education is going to come down to when you teach people that are your neighbors, you will have a higher quality of education. So I would love to see more local educators, teach the very communities that they come from.
Do you see maybe a potential shift of people going away from the public school system and people maybe going to more of like a homeschool thing where a local member of the community who has a teaching credential or degree or whatever they need to do that takes 6-7 kids at their house and maybe do something like that? Do you see that a potential shift towards that?
I don't see that. I think that Santa Ana Unified is definitely making its improvements. I think that if there's an area where we can improve is we can certainly have more music and art programs. We have tremendous intervention and prevention services. We've had a significant decrease in our suspension and expulsion rates, which is huge. So it shows that we're finally listening to kids, but I think that if they keep making these improvements, they're going to be the place to go for sure.
Outside of education, what are some other policies?
Some other policies that we're focusing on are going to be public safety policies. Having a comprehensive public safety strategy on keeping our community safe. That's a question that I think a lot of people struggle to have a really good answer with. I recently debated my opponents, and we had this candidate forum. Salud! Gotta bless that, brother. But it's a question that is important, and I think that unfortunately there's not a one-way thing to do when it comes to public safety. But you can have a comprehensive strategy that tackles all the different facets of it, right? So let's talk about safety. Safety is something that has been taught to us in Santa Ana that is only singular to police. Why is the definition of safety how fast a police can get to my house? Why is the definition of safety how fast can you arrest my sibling? Right? Safety is how you feel. Do I feel supported? Do I feel like I can go to that park? Do I feel like I can go to that community center? Right? So I want to create a safe environment. So how do you do that? You do that by looking at the ethnography of our community. What is lacking in our community and what is working? Well, we know what's not working is our roads are not well paved, our streets are not well lit, our parks are not invested in, our restrooms are torn down, our handball courts are cracked, our basketball courts have no nets, and our soccer fields have no grass and potholes, right? But then let's take a look at our community centers. Our community centers are not funded properly. They don't have the adequate resources and programs that we need, and we have one library. So where can you be safe in that community? When those places that should be safe aren't funded, where do you go? So then ask yourself, why do we have so many gang members? Who creates the gang members? It's not libraries,
Right.
it's not community centers. It's the fact that you've taken those resources that could have acted as a safe haven and as a vehicle for college, but you take them away and you give them more access to go to prison.
Right.
So I know that gang members aren't born, they're created. We know that librarians aren't born, they're created. You got to go to college, right? So let's do that. So how do we do it? We need to have a comprehensive strategy to keep this community safe. So that means we have to keep our parks well lit. We have to maintain our roads, make sure that they're paved. We have to ensure that we have cross guards at our major intersections where there's schools in session,
Right.
so that kids actually have a relationship and know, okay, this person is actively walking kids across the street, right? That looks safe. It feels safe. In addition to that, having music and art intervention and prevention programs at community centers where kids have access to instruments, they have access to arts, they have the ability to express themselves. So that way a kid doesn't have to write his sorrows and his rest in peace on a wall.
Right.
He can express himself every day through a music or through an art program. And that's how we keep kids safe. Furthermore, I believe that we need to have more community gardening programs so that kids have access to agriculture and they can become entrepreneurs. But in addition to that, that's also public health.
Right.
So when we talked about community safety, incorporate all those facets that make community safe. So you have to look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Are the physiological needs of our community taken care of? Are kids well fed?
Right.
Answer's no. Do kids have secure housing? The answer's no. So let's start doing that. Number 2 is, what type of relationships do we have? Are we building relationships with these kids? If the only mechanism you have to keep people safe is police officers, then you are doing your community a disservice. So I want to delegate a lot of that police responsibility to other experts so that we can have social workers, mental health workers, work with people that are experiencing crisis, work with people that are experiencing mental health breakdowns, healthcare workers that are working with people that are struggling with substance abuse issues. I think that is how we are going to see a shift in public safety. And then lastly, I want to integrate a community health initiative where we are going to have a community health worker at each of our major community centers. So that way, that individual will work as a liaison between the residents and the community. So I'll have a representative that works at the community center that you can see Monday through Friday. And that representative might identify that this neighborhood wants more stop signs. This neighborhood wants a ballet program.
Right.
The neighborhood that is on this side, their community health worker might identify that this neighborhood wants to have a community fair for Mexican Independence Day, right? Whatever that looks like, we need to have folks that are on the ground, that are actively working with the residents and that are serving their needs. And as an elected official, our job is to make sure that we are responsive to those needs. And I think that number 1, what's going to keep a community safe is engagement. People need to feel like they are part of that process of creating change.
Like having a voice.
Exactly. And the most effective way I think we can do that right now is you have to be data driven. So Santa Ana is the 8th most dangerous police force in the country, Santa Ana Police Department. So I think a way to have transparency is we need to introduce a police oversight commission. And this police oversight commission will help us have community residents at the table that can help make decisions on policing, that can help investigate. We should have the ability to subpoena, and this police oversight commission should be friendly to people that have been justice impacted, people that have been through the system. They should also have a voice too.
I love hearing that too, especially through social media. I've seen a lot of cartoons in regards to the misunderstanding of defund the police. I think a lot of people have the misconception of what it means. But there's a great cartoon where it's, a police officer with a bunch of rocks on his back, and it has all these different things. and there's there's two standbyers.
Yeah. So.
And they're like, one guy is saying, how can you say defund the police when they have all this to deal with? And then it has like, ideal like model society. What it really means by defund the police is, hey, they're only to do is like protect and serve, and then you have the mental health workers, you have social service workers, you have different programs in place throughout the community that the police officers don't have to worry about. So they're only there to call for the stop, the really big crimes, with the robberies in place or stuff like that, break-in, etc., etc.
Yeah.
I think that was like a great depiction of that, and I think, I don't know if we'll ever change the phrase defund the police, but it's more of a reallocation of the funds, right, for the police department. And where are those funds going to? Are they going to weapons and high-tech cars? Or are they going to, hey, like proper training to how to de-escalate things with their voice rather than using force, whether it's a weapon or with their baton, etc., etc. Because there's probably, in a perfect society, there's a world where there's people patrolling, whether they're police officers or another part of the system, that don't carry weapons, and they're there to de-escalate things verbally. Because I feel like if you're a great communicator, it doesn't matter how a hostile situation may be, if you can de-escalate something with your voice rather than any kind of force, I mean, you'll win that battle 10 times out of 10,
Yeah, I'll tell you, man, it's so important that you're saying this. And it's crazy because, like, for my job, I work with people that, young people that are going through so much that crisis happens immediately. And sometimes in my profession, we rotate, and last week I was on call. So what that means is that any hour of the night or the day, I got to take a call.
Yeah.
So I had like 6 calls last week. I had folks that were dealing with homicidal ideation, like folks that were struggling with some really, really adverse stuff. And I had to help them through de-escalation, through using dialogue, right? And it's interesting because through going through these experiences, for me with my mental health background, my mind never reverted to, let me call the police right now.
Right.
Because I knew that would only escalate that situation. Yeah. And so it goes to show that there's ways that we can do this. I think that if we had mental health workers actually work in these specific fields, it would drastically change public safety and how we know it. I think that that cartoon really did it justice. And yeah, shout out the internet.
Yeah,
does some really good things sometimes.
And to kind of speak on a similar topic, I know at least from my standpoint, my father's battling addiction, and I know there could be sometimes domestic violence in my household, and I'm hesitant to call the police sometimes because I'm scared of what may happen or what
lose your dad.
It may escalate to, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like that's problematic. Like there's no one else I can call in that moment that's easy, right? I can maybe look something up on the internet, but it might take a few minutes or a couple seconds as the internet loads and kind of gives me a directory, and I have to try and find something. It's not as instant as, hey, dialing 911. But then, again, you never know what may happen if those police show up and
get a gun
out influence or something like that. So it's scary, at least from my point of view. It's something that I wouldn't want to wish upon anybody. So there is a huge need for those different societal workers, whether they're for mental health or addiction, all kinds of stuff, patrolling in the neighborhood just like police officers, but they're more specific to different calls, right? So there is a call, there's an operator, but then they kind of direct them to different things.
Yeah, that's a very good point, and it's something that I think not too many people understand, that we have the ability to do that. And I just think that again goes to the importance of local elections. Is if there's going to be a foundation of change that we can set for the future moving forward, it's not going to happen through a presidential election. Chances are it's going to happen through a local election. So let's model that. Let's show them that community safety looks like investment. It looks like creating opportunity for people. And if there's a lesson we've learned from our ancestors, I always like revert back to hip hop. Tupac Shakur says, I never did a crime I didn't have to do. Right? Like no one wants to steal to feed their family. Right. But some people, that's their only option they have. Right? And it's not, like, morally that sounds challenging because your child's hungry. Yeah. But for some people, that's all they know. And so I need to meet people where they're at when it comes to being an elected official. because whether you have fallen through the cracks or whether you stand tall and stand strong, you're just as important as the person next to me, as the daughter that I'm raising. You're as important as that, and you also deserve to be invested in, whether you've made mistakes or not. So when I look at unconditional care and support, I'm also talking about those folks that do make those mistakes. That, hey man, we got you.
Yeah.
Let's find a way to do things differently.
Teaching that it's okay to make mistakes as long as they learn from their mistakes. Right?
People are redeemable.
100%. That's one thing I really try and aim for on the podcast, and have different people that have had kind of rags to riches stories, and people, one of the guests that I've had on that still blows my mind, Manny Hernandez Sr. He was 30-something years old. He was going to get locked up for life. All of a sudden, the witness said that he wasn't involved in whatever crime he was accused for, and he started a new beginning, and he basically started supplying the authentic gang members for movies and TV shows, and he's worked with stuff like Training Day and other TV shows like that.
Dude,
that's
so
how
dope.
that's how he made it off in Hollywood, and now he's writing scripts and short
What episode
films.
is that?
Probably in the 70s or 80s. So
I'd love to watch
ago.
that.
Yeah.
I'd love to watch that episode.
Yeah.
That's so dope.
I'll definitely send it over to you. It's
Yeah.
only audio only because I wasn't videoing
That's
them.
dope still though.
But yeah, it was a crazy good story because I remember hearing that. I was like, man, look at he was 36 when he turned his life around, and I think sometimes people feel like they get stuck in ruts at 28,
never too late.
25, and it's like you gotta have so much life ahead of you.
Oh my goodness, yeah. Speaking of rags to riches, shout out to local businesses over here.
Yes. Is there any local businesses you'd like to shout out?
Carnitas Uruapan,
Yeah.
Artisa Pilar, they're freaking awesome. The little puerquitos in front of their business are beautiful. Dude, I grew up on Rayton Civic Center, so we would always go down 5th Street to get to Spurgeon as a kid, and then I would walk down 5th Street to get home as a kid. And Carnitas Uruapan has always been right there. And then Sarinana's Tamale Factory is freaking amazing. And speaking of that, they endorsed my campaign. People think endorsements you have to have an elected official.
Yeah.
When you're running a campaign, it's I'm more proud of those endorsements from just your regular everyday people. Those are the people that matter the most, because those are the people that make this community up.
Right.
So Sarinana's Tamale Factory is one of my favorite spots in the city. I'm regularly there all the time. I love their tacos dorados de pollo. They're amazing.
Oh man.
Yeah. So they're amazing. And then on top of that too, their tamales are, of course, to die for. And I believe they're the oldest standing Mexican restaurant in Orange County. So they've been here since 1939 in the community. So shout out to them.
Oh, that's incredible. So you also mentioned parks, and we're recording here at the El Salvador Park here in Santa Ana. Yeah. What are you talk about reinvesting into the community and stuff like that, but what are some modifications or changes, if any, you'd like to see at this park?
Yeah, let's talk about this park. So I believe in history. I'm very much a big supporter of knowing your local history. So I'll start with mine. We're at El Salvador Parque, and this park here is very personal to my family. And to my journey too, because I went to Fremont Elementary right there, and I remember walking here as a little boy, and I remember hanging out in this community and having all my friends here, and we would play kickball right there. I remember kicking that ball so far and just running to all those bases, and I was a little guy, I was a little kid. It was just really good times, and I remember playing on top of that concrete rooftop. There's a rooftop right here. We used to play dodgeball on top of it. It was so cool. The park didn't feel safe, where you could come to this park and you could find needles on the ground. And I can't tell you the countless friends that I have that went to prison, or the countless friends that I had that died. Some of them in this park. And it was really sad growing up as a kid. I remember when I was a child, I was a freshman in high school when my friends got shot here on the corner, minutes after he dropped me off at my house. We were walking together, and I always remembered that day. So for me, I understand that parks are places where people should feel safe, but as dangerous as this park is statistically, it's my home, and I feel connected to it, and I want people to be proud of this park. So as a council member, I'm going to look to invest in this park, to reconstruct those restrooms, to beautify that community center, to ensure that kids have access to these programs at no cost to them. Because this should be a place where kids learn how to play music, how to do art, how to create murals. We should have that community garden open so that kids can have access to fruits and vegetables there. And we should have families be able to adopt those community gardens. That would be so dope. But then furthermore, imagine having cultural celebrations and a Dia de los Muertos here in this community. Like having an altar at the handball court. So where families that live in this community can come to this park and use this, and this is their hub, right? And in addition to that, using these soccer fields so that when we have sports funded programs, those soccer programs can use these fields and they can play there. And that's how you should use your parks. You know, my dad and my mom grew up in this community, and I didn't have my dad because of gang violence. And a lot of men in my family chose that path as well. I was the first generation of men to not go that route. So I chose a route of doing everything possible to not become those men. So I embraced being soft. I embraced being educated. I embraced doing everything opposite of what I saw men in this community do. I didn't want to harm people. I wanted to help them. And, you know, God gave me a daughter, and my daughter changed my life. I always tell folks I have the greatest privilege of all of raising a daughter. And, you know, history shows us women do tremendous things. I have the honor of raising a daughter that is going to challenge racism just like I did. And she'll do that for 7 generations forward. Right? So to raising the future, brother, and to making sure that the future has access to a beautiful park here in El Salvador. Here in El Salvador Park in Santa Ana, and that this park one day when I'm not here can be better than I ever envisioned.
Wonderful. Isn't that crazy though? You said something earlier where you said family, you wanted to go away from them, and so you said you were soft. And I think you also mentioned it too, that women typically have been more, I would say, in tune with their emotion. But I think it's crazy in our society we consider you're a man and you're more in tune with your emotion.
Let's talk that.
If you're willing to speak out about how you feel mentally, physically, emotionally,
I'll tell you this. People don't look at me and see soft. I've heard people say that I look like a cholo. I've been called a cholo. I've been called a hyper-masculine male, toxic male, like all these like pseudo activist like lingo, and it's wrong because you don't know how I feel. You don't know how I navigate my beauty and my power, but I do it every day. And so folks might see me and say, "Oh, he looks like a tough dude." But America also looks at black men and brown men and says we're trash. And if nobody believes that, look at the prison system. It'll tell you how they see men. So that's why so many men go there, is because we don't see beauty in us. So I'm gonna tell you, I'm proud to be soft. And for someone to see that soft side of me, you have to be able to see past what you see here. To be able to see that men can be beautiful, intelligent, smart, and loving too. Because what folks might know is, although I look very masculine, I'm probably more feminine than I am masculine. Because I want to love more than I want to harm. Right? I want to teach more than I want to. I want to learn more than I want to teach. And I think that's something that we need to destigmatize. Is that just because we look a certain way as men is not representative of how we feel or how we navigate the world. Because I think the biggest misconception I've seen in myself, especially because of my background and where I come from and my family's background, I've found a lot of people to misunderstand me and misinterpret who I really am. And ultimately, that's why I run for office, is because if they're doing it to me and I'm doing all these good things and I went through all those things that I've went through, imagine what they're doing to folks that are just starting out. Imagine what they're doing to those individuals that are just getting out of prison today. Imagine what they're doing to that kid that made his first mistake in 6th grade right now. That kid might not make it to 18 if we keep treating him the way that we treat adults like myself. So we need to redo this. We need to create a world and a community that is rooted in compassion, because we understand that people are not defined by their mistakes. We need to have a community that is rooted in equity, because we know that injustices exist, and we know that I shouldn't need to stand in a box to be equal to you.
Right.
And lastly, we need a community that is going to disrupt hopelessness at every opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
So if that means that we feed the community more often than we ever have, then we got to do it.
Mm-hmm.
If it means that we need to throw more cultural celebrations to bring people together, then we got to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And examples of that are, I'm going to look to create a Juneteenth celebration.
Mm-hmm.
We shouldn't celebrate black people because of the fact that they got killed by a police officer.
Right.
Why don't we celebrate them while they're alive?
Right.
Why don't we have marches? Because we march for people when they die.
Yeah.
But what if on Juneteenth we had a celebration, and every single year we march around the black communities in Santa Ana?
Mm-hmm.
That's beautiful. That's celebratory. That's empowering.
Right.
What if we replace Columbus Day with Indigenous Peoples Day?
Yeah.
And we do a celebration at City Hall.
Yeah.
And we have Black Eyed Peas and Redbone
Yeah.
perform, like Indigenous Native American groups.
Yeah.
Right? That's how we should celebrate each other,
Mm-hmm.
is through those cultural celebrations. So it's just redoing things. And I think that, part of what makes this experience so special is I don't have all the answers. I'm a 28-year-old adult myself. I just turned 28 August 19, and for me it's like I never saw myself represented. As a kid and as an adult, I never saw myself represented. So if I didn't see myself, I know damn well my neighbors and my peers don't see themselves represented.
Right.
So let's get a seat at the table. Let's open up the doors so folks can come in like they own the place. Let's get them a seat so that when their time comes, they can have that seat. And their voices could be much louder than mine ever could be. And then we're on the cusp of something revolutionary and change.
Of course. And that's the thing too. People may expect results right away within 1, maybe even 2 years. They realize this is like, we're at such a disadvantage right now. In order to just climb, like where you said, we don't have to stand on a box to be equal. We're just equal as is. It's gonna take probably a decade or maybe even more. And it's a grind, just like anything though. To not overturn, but just to go against the grain against anything that's been politically or systematically placed there for a long time. You have to break that, and it's gonna take a long time. Whether it's getting a seat at the table, making talking about your emotions more open and more okay, make it a safe space, everything, public safety, education, all that stuff. It's going to take a long time,
dude.
And you just have to be patient, but you also have to be actively working for it too, each day. Like each day, what is it? Not everybody can do, one person can't do everything, but everybody can do something.
Farron Kid.
Yeah.
Farron Kid, the Black OC. That's my boy right there.
Kid.
Shout out.
Yeah.
Dude, it's awesome, man. Having these conversations with you, and we're here at the park. Shout out to Sammy Love, standing behind the camera. Hey, Sammy. But it's really just remarkable, like, to be able to have these conversations with people that are dynamic and young and intelligent. And it's like, man, we got to change the narrative, because the narrative for people in this community were that I should have been dead or in prison by 18.
Right.
Well, that ain't happening. And it's not going to happen. And I'm going to make sure that it doesn't happen moving forward.
Right.
Right? So people talk about the system being broken. It's not broken. It's working damn well. It's just not working for us.
Right.
So I'm coming in here to change that. I'm coming in here to kick down those doors and to make sure that we change this system to work for us. And I think that now that we have district elections, it's the first time in history where we get to say, no, hold up. I live here.
Yeah.
I understand what this is like. It's not going to take some police officer that doesn't care about my community, that only sees my community as a means to put more bodies in prison. That's not where change is going to come from. You're not going to arrest your way out of this problem, brother. We're going to love and protect each other, and we're going to give resources to those who need it, and we're going to build foundations for people to do what they love most. And that is how this city is going to change. And my vision that I have is that over the next 4 to 8 years, we're gonna have more women in office in Santa Ana. We're gonna have more people of color sitting at the dais, and we're damn sure gonna have strong black leadership come out of Santa Ana too.
Oh yeah.
So here's to doing that.
What's up?
Yeah, dude.